Hello, magical experimenters. Welcome to tonight's live stream. And tonight we're going to be talking about your ethics and morals and how to determine what your true north is. And this conversation comes out of a post in the Magical Experiments Facebook group where a couple different people shared, I have some moral slash ethical concerns about doing magical work. And I was like, okay, let's unpack that and explore it. And we ended up unpacking and exploring it in the group, and I think it helped those people figure some stuff out. But it made me realize that I wanted to do a video on this, which kind of builds off of last week's video where I was talking about results, because I think that it's really important to recognize what your ethical slash moral compass is and how that's playing a role in the magical work that you do. Now, I'm going to be very transparent here and just tell you that I am a very morally flexible person, which is to say that I tend to take a situational approach to morals and ethics. There are certain situations where I might not do something, and other situations where I would feel it was perfectly justified. I'm a firm believer in the idea of teaching somebody an objective lesson, for example, because sometimes the best way for people to learn is to have that lesson. And the reason I share that with you is because it's not to tell you that you want to be like me, okay? It's just that I believe in being transparent about who I am and how I show up in any sphere, okay? I'm never going to pretend that I'm a white light virtuous kind of person. I'm not. You know, I am perfectly capable under the right situation of doing, some pretty horrible stuff if I need to. Thankfully, those situations are very few and far between. And in large part, that's because I've done a ton of internal work. And I've done that internal work because I don't want the drama in my life. And so that in and of itself has helped me determine my ethical and moral compass, as it were, because really what I'm focused around is, you know, how much drama do I want to deal with in my life? Now, that may not be what your motivation is for how to determine why you're doing what you're going to do, and that's okay. But when we're doing magical work, we want to be very clear on whether there's any internal resistance to that magical work or toward the result that we're shooting for. Because if there's any internal resistance, that internal resistance is going to get in the way. And sometimes that internal resistance is going to show up in the form of a specific ethical or moral objection to what you're doing. And let me be very clear here. It is perfectly normal and okay to have ethical and moral objections to something that you might do. If there is some part of you that is not in full agreement with what you're doing, then you need to honor that part, or you need to, at the very least, have a dialogue with that part and figure out what's really going on and either come up with a different way, come up with a compromise, or just don't do it. Now, I will tell you that one of the reasons why I'm so flexible when it comes to things is partially because of my childhood. I grew up in a situation where I learned how to lie and manipulate early on. I'm not particularly proud of it, but I learned it from my dad because he was really good at it. And I learned how to do it as a form of survival. But as I grew up, and I had other experiences, and I went and I lived with my mom, for example. One of the experiences I had with my mom is she basically said, at one point she said, I don't like it that you're lying to me. I don't trust you. And I really sat with that and came away with the conclusion that I didn't want to lie to her, and I didn't want to be in that kind of relationship with her where she didn't trust me. It didn't feel good. And so I changed that about myself because it came right down to I wanted to have a good relationship. What that experience taught me is that it's really important to get clear on why you're doing what you're doing, or why you aren't doing what you're doing. If you're not clear on why you're doing what you're doing, or why you aren't doing what you're doing, then it's very hard to determine what your ethical slash moral compass is, or if and consequently you can end up doing things where afterwards you realize, oh, I don't really feel good about that. Well, then why did you do it? Well, because I just didn't know what I wanted or who I was. Really, figuring out your ethical and moral compass is part of that. Now, I will tell you, I'm not a firm believer in certain things like the Wiccan Rede, for example, that if you do this, it's going to come back to you 3 times over. I've never had that happen. Like I've done magical work and I've never noticed a 3 times result, either good or bad, in terms of or amplification of what I've done, unless I've purposely built it into my magical working. But here's the funny thing I found is that if you believe that that's a genuine truism about magic, then that's going to be something that comes true for you. I've seen people who have done magical work where that's been their moral compass or their ethical compass, and it has dictated and set up their experience of the magical work that they've done. So basically, they'll do a working and they'll have it show up in a way where it's like, okay, yeah, this is going to happen 3 times over to me if I do this. And lo and behold, they do some harmful magical working, and 3 times the harm comes into their life. Or they do something good, and 3 times the good. And they might say, well, as long as I stick to doing good things, that'll be fine. But here's the thing, folks. It's very hard to not sometimes do something harmful because people tease you off or whatever. Again, some of this comes down to mastering yourself and figuring yourself out. But ultimately, under the right circumstances and under the right situation, you can be capable of doing anything. You might not think you would be capable of it, but you could be. And I say that again, not because I've necessarily gone and done like truly horrible things. I've occasionally done some things that I'm not necessarily, that I wouldn't necessarily do under normal circumstances, but I felt it was justified. I had someone once try to come after my creativity, for example. Well, I took what they did and I turned it on them, and I took back what was mine and then some. And that felt like the right thing to do, because it really boiled down to I had to be willing to take care of myself and not let somebody come after what was important to me. And again, some of you are going to watch this and you're going to probably be like, my gosh, he's just a cold person that he can talk about it like that way. And it's not that. It really boils down to I have a firm understanding of myself and what I am willing and capable of doing under the right circumstances. But I also have reasons for not doing things. And so it really boils down to, I always, in any situation, I look at what are my pros and what are my cons. What are the reasons to do something and what are the reasons not to do something. And then I weigh those out and I decide, and then I look at the consequences and I say, well, what are the consequences if I choose to do a magical act or a mundane act for that matter? Are those consequences that I can live with? And by taking that kind of approach, a very practical approach I might add, I figure out what works for me and what doesn't. And so I apply that to any situation I'm in. Now, in your case, it may not come down to that. And again, you have to pay attention to those ethical, moral boundaries that you have. If you have some part of you that says, I find it objectionable to do a curse. Well, as long as that part is going to believe that and is going to, say that that's not the right way to do things, then you're not going to be able to curse somebody, or you're going to curse and it's just not going to work out. If, on the other hand, you're like, under the right circumstances, this person's crossed my boundaries, this person intends me harm, this person's going to, intends people I love harm, I could do this. Well, then you'll find that, under those circumstances, you could do it. But if even under those circumstances, you have a part of yourself that says, no, I can't do that, then you either need to negotiate with that part of yourself or you need to accept it and figure out something else. And again, the same thing also applies to doing something good for somebody. let's say you decide to do some healing magic for somebody. If you have a particular clause in your belief system that says, you can't do this without permission, then you need to make sure you get permission. And if that person doesn't give you permission, then you're not going to do that. If, on the other hand, you're somebody who's like, you know what, this person's not feeling well, I can't get their permission, and I really want to help them out in some form or manner, so I'm going to go ahead and do this, then, then you may find that you're able to do it. It all really boils down to, you have to be honest with yourself about what you are capable of and what you're not capable of. Now, I will tell you this too. As I said at the very beginning, I'm a morally flexible person, but at the same time, one thing that I have come up with over the years is a firm understanding, based on my early, especially based on like my early to mid 20s, when I caused a lot of drama with different people. The realization that I came away with subsequently is that it's just not worth it to stir up trouble with other people. So for myself, I have actively pursued creating a life with as low drama as possible, as little drama as possible. So I don't go out of my way to start conflicts with people anymore. I don't let my anger or emotions get the better of me if I can help it. And if they do get the better of me, I at least own and acknowledge it and start to figure out why before I take any action. I take a calculated approach to everything I do, and the reason why I do it is because at the end of the day, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, is this really worth my time and effort? What's really important? What's worth my time and effort? And what's worth my time and effort is really boils down to taking care of my community and making sure that I'm there for the people that need me, and taking care of this magical community that I'm part of and that I've helped to found in the form of the Magical Experiments community, and also really being there for my family and everything else, and taking care of myself. And it boils down to a simple thing. I can put my energy towards somebody else who's trying to mess with me, or I can put my energy toward taking care of the people that matter, and pursuing the goals that matter. And so that's kind of the way that I look at things when it comes to like figuring out like what is an ethical or moral compass to go by. Really evaluate your life in terms of, what is it worth to you? What is it worth to you if you're going to do X, Y, or Z? Because at the end of the day, you have to be willing to take care of yourself and know that you're doing the right thing. Not just put... And doing the right thing isn't about living by a specific code of behavior. I mean, maybe it is for some of you. It's for me, it's more about, am I doing right by my community? Am I doing right by my family? Am I doing right by myself? Am I doing right by the people that are important to me? And is it worth my time and effort to go in this other direction where potentially it's going to create more problems than anything else? And that's how I look at things. And again, other people are going to look at it in other ways. You ultimately have to determine what your best choices are. I share this video because I wanted to kind of bring this into perspective, especially around results, because when you're doing results-based magic, you better be satisfied and happy with the result if you're going to do it. I mean, why do it otherwise, right? And you need to know at the same time that your identity aligns with that. And if you're not sure if your identity aligns with it, that's where you need to do the internal work and like figure out like, what are my objections? Where is this coming from? And then determine like, what is that worth to you? And make your decision. By doing that, that's where you end up ultimately making the best decisions in your life, because you're doing it from a place of recognizing where you're coming from and what's important to you, and then using that as your barometer. All right, just wanted to share that with you. I hope you guys are staying safe and happy. Please take care of yourselves and please take care of the people that are important to you.